they've asked me, like, I'm going to get to stay there with them that night after the meeting, and they've got this really colorful cake that's on the table. And I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful cake. And they're like, yeah, that's a king cake. We're going to, and I said, a king cake? What's a king cake? And they were like, oh, you'll find out. So we go to the meeting. We come back afterwards, and we start cutting into this cake. And anybody ever had a king cake? They're really colorful. Looks, all the colors of Mardi Gras. It really kind of tastes like maybe a convenience store honey bun, maybe, like, those ones that have the icing on them. But anyway, but it was pretty good, So I was like, man, this is a good cake. Coffee's good, And then my fork hit something hard. What? That's weird. And so I kind of just keep on, and then I pull out the thing that's hard, and there's a little plastic baby in my cake, which I didn't know. I didn't expect that, and it shocked me, and it was really a scary looking little baby. And I'm like, man, well, why is there a plastic baby? Why is there a toy in my food? And the people are like, oh, it's the king. That's baby Jesus, and it goes in the cake. And I'm like, all right, so does everybody get one? Or no, just per one person. I'm like, well, what do I get? I got the baby. What happens? Oh, you get to do the dishes. Oh, all right. And they said, normally you would also bring the cake next year, but since you're not going to be here next year, you just get to do the dishes. That's great. So anyway, we're at the grocery store this past Tuesday, and they had some king cakes, baby to the side, where you can just, place it wherever you want it. So we picked one up, brought it home. Jack, my 5-year-old twin son, sees the little baby, and he's like, what's the little toy? And I'm like, well, that's Jesus. And I was kind of just explaining, it represents Jesus, and there's these things. And he said, well, I want Jesus. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. He said, what happens if I get Jesus? And I said, well, the tradition, if what I've been told is you do the dishes. And he said, I don't want Jesus then. Daddy, you can have Jesus. And the minute he said it, I thought, I got convicted myself. I was like, man, that was something that God was saying to me, and I felt like I needed to share it this morning because it's just so true of us. Like, man, yes, Jesus, bring redemption to my broken life. Yes, Jesus, bring peace to my chaos. Yes, Jesus, enter in and bless my finances. Yes, Jesus. But then when Jesus asks us to do something, whoa, maybe that's for somebody else, right? Maybe we just cut that out of our Bibles and move it to the side and only memorize the verses about how things come to us and how we get blessed, and not so much about how there's something that we should do, But we all also know that love, when you're in love, that's what you do. Like, there are actions and things that you do because you love. And if this redemption has come to us and we're in passionate love with Jesus, then there are just some things that he expects and that we don't question. We do. Of all the things that I think seem difficult personally, and I've just seen for the body of Christ, for Christians, it seems really, really tough, is this thing that Jesus is asking us to do, to take this message of redemption and good news and to share it with other people. I mean, it wigs us out. It scares us. For most of us, it's something that we can't even imagine what that might look like. I mean, it's crazy because we do it with other things in our lives that we like. A restaurant that we like, we tell everybody about it. A sport team that we like, we can't shut up about it, A place that we like to shop, ladies, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out something to make it. Whatever that thing is that you like, these shoes that I just bought, whatever it is, we don't, but then it comes to Jesus, and for some reason, we don't want to talk about it. And we struggle. Now, I'm going to share with you, just to kind of set the stage, we're going to end up looking at John chapter 4, which we looked at John chapter 3 last week. But to kind of set the stage, there's this one illustration that I heard several years ago, and it really impacted me, and I kind of want to set the backdrop for our discussion today. And it's an illustration that a guy named William Booth shared. He's the guy that started the Salvation Army. They called him the General. And the Salvation Army back in the day, you should read on its history. I mean, what it is today and what it used to be are very different. And it was really an incredible thing that this guy, William Booth, did. And he's kind of set this stage, kind of a vision that he had. And he said the world's kind of like this angry, black, dark sea that has these huge waves that are going up and down. And all the people are kind of out in that sea of sin and darkness and pain. And they're just fighting. They're fighting to stay above water. And some maybe appear to be doing better than others. Some have been fighting so long that they're just about to give it up and they're just gasping their last breaths of air. Some seem to be treading water, but you know that it's just a matter of time before their strength gives way. But all of the whole lot of them, are out in the middle of this ocean, just like Romans 3:23 says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God and are in that place. And he says that Jesus came along and he saved people from the Black Sea. Maybe you and me, He revealed to us that we were in the sea, that he was the answer, and we leaned on him, and he took us, and he pulled us to this platform, this island. But he said what's sad about it, and that's beautiful, but what seems to happen is that people that get out of the sea and get to the platform, to the island, a lot of the times, most of the time, once they get there, they start to just kind of get busy with life. They start to really enjoy this newfound, solid ground that they're standing on and all the blessings of being in that place. And that real crazy quick, they forget the ocean that they've come from. And they stop, even paying attention to the people who are out in the ocean still drowning. He goes further to say that the people on this island, I've actually got a painting that someone painted of this, and it's got people up on the island, like guys doing business and families doing things together and hobbies and people even sitting on the side of the dock fishing in the angry ocean, all kind of consumed with their own lives and their own things. And it says that sometimes this group will climb up the kind of the highest point on the island, and they'll look over to where they think the mainland is, heaven, and they'll cry out, "Hey, will somebody come save us? This island, we're so removed from it. Would you come save us from this place and take us to that place?" And all the while, they're thinking that Jesus is over there. But he's actually right back in the angry ocean, working to bring more people to the island and crying out to the people on the platform, "Hey, you guys are missing it. Would you come out here with me? Would you come help me?" Now, I don't know what that does to you, but I real easily, when I heard this, identified that I was one of the people on the platform who had forgotten about the ocean from which I had come. And it's obvious in these conversations that we've been looking at that picture is true. Jesus is there. I mean, we even looked at a few weeks ago, Luke 19:10, that he came to seek and to save the lost. I mean, that's where he is. When Matthew comes to follow him, where does he go? He goes right to this place of this group that the Pharisees are like, "Who are you talking to?" "Well, I'm going to seek and to save the lost." That's what he does. That's where he is. And if we want to know him, if you really want to know him, then you'll go and be there with him. And it's amazing how he can use us. When I was in college, one of the things that really influenced me for this, I went to a summer kind of internship that we worked, but at nights on weekends we did Bible study and prayer and also just kind of learned what would it look like to take this good news that has come to us and to begin to share it with other people. And it was awesome, and like I said, very influential for me. So later on, I was working at a campus, and we didn't have something like that. And so me and a group of other guys, we were like, "Hey, let's start something like that, that for these students, that would be that impactful for them and kind of a training project." So to do that, before we did, I went to the guy who started the one that I was a part of, and I said, "Man," brought my notepad, and I'm like, "Hey, what is it? Because I've seen things like this fail horribly, and some that, like the one you started, still going and thriving and has life. So, I mean, what is it, man? Give me the points, So I was ready. And he said, well, you can put up your notepad. It's really just one. And I said, well, man, shoot, what is it? And he said, well, the minute that anything like that it loses the encouragement and the challenge for the people of God to take what they've been given in that redemptive message of Jesus and to give it to somebody else, the minute that challenge is no longer there, remember that the minute that training is no longer there, the minute that camaraderie and mission and purpose is gone, it will die. We never did that, so that's the reason it's that. I was like, man, it can't be that easy. So we started this thing, and I was like to the other guys I was doing it, I mean, this has to be, like in our plan, this has to be a big, huge part of it. And they kind of pushed back at that because it was uncomfortable. Because the students didn't necessarily go, woohoo, let's go meet people we don't know and, whatever. Or let's not, that's kind of scary and that's kind of awkward and that's kind of whatever. So I held that line until God moved me to a different place. And then it became the project that didn't have that as part of it. And guess what happened? It died. I heard something early this week just saying the exact same thing about a church. A group of followers of Jesus that come together. But if we come together and it's about just us, and it's about what this means for us, and it's about the blessing that we get from it, and we become really inward focused, we get very bored sooner or later. And we also become very critical because it's just always something wrong, or this could be better, or that could be better, or this isn't giving me enough of this, or that's not giving me enough of this. And the minute that we start to look back to the angry sea and care about that and invite people to it, then it changes everything. I think that it's also true for the individual believer. If this isn't part of your life and it's just about you, the same thing will happen to you. And if your faith feels very stale and lifeless, I challenge you. Go share your story with somebody else and watch what happens. Watch what happens. I say that because it happened to me. Because I was in that place and someone came along and said, hey, what about your football team, Mark? What if you told them about how you met Jesus and what he's done in your life? And when I started doing that, all of a sudden, my life started to just be filled with his peace and his life and purpose. I think that kind of everything else started to happen and move forward in my discipleship because all of a sudden I cared about somebody other than myself, and I realized that this message came to me on its way to somebody else. So we're going to look at this John chapter 4 today, and there's this Samaritan woman, and I want us to look at what happens in this interaction with Jesus and the Samaritan woman, but there's also this interaction that happens with Jesus' disciples who continue just not to get it, which we can throw rocks at them real easy, but let's be honest, y'all, that's us, right? Especially today. This is us. And something else, as we've gone through all these different stories, I love to catch themes. I mean, each one is unique and but there's definitely some themes that are happening. I mean, so far we've seen Jesus interact with blue-collar workers and trust fund babies, extravagant sinners, and self-righteous pricks. People are climbing trees to try to get a glimpse of him. They're coming under the cover of night to come catch him. Sometimes he goes to them. Sometimes they come to him. Some are very underinformed about him and in the kingdom. Others have been misinformed about him in the kingdom. I mean, there's a lot of differences between them all, and he meets each one of them, not as a project, but as people who he begins this relationship with and uniquely meets them right where they are. But then each time the message is pretty much the same. He asks these questions and he engages them to bring them to a place where they realize their desperation. Understand that they are desperate. But when I say underinformed or misinformed, they may not realize that they're in the angry ocean and they're about to drown. Or maybe they've got misinformation about how they're going to make it to the island, and they think that they can make it on their own power and don't necessarily need him. And to each one of these people, and I mean, if you've right off the cuff understood exactly what Jesus was saying, then you were the only one in the room. Because it's been some crazy stuff, right? Like he'll throw out this question or that question and talk about being born again and all these different things, and everybody's like, what? The wind blows where you wish? But each time, if you really dial it down, Jesus is about this. He's bringing them to that place where they recognize their need and where they surrender in complete surrender to who he is and let him do his redemptive work in them. And it's no different with this Samaritan woman. And it's an interesting story because Jesus finds himself in Samaria, which is not a place that Jews would go. They would avoid it. Even if the beeline was right through the middle of it, they would go around it because they hated Samaritans. And it says that Jesus made his way through that area. And that man, he was tired from the journey, evidently really hungry and hadn't had anything to eat because he sends his disciples to go get some food. And it says that wearied from his journey, he sits down by this well. And this woman, she comes and sits beside him. It says that it's noontime, which is evidently not the time to go to the well, the hottest part of the day, which means that she's going to the well at the time that nobody else goes to the well because she doesn't really want to have a conversation with anybody either. Jesus is there sitting by the well taking some rest, and here these two people are together. And I'm going to give you kind of the synopsis. You can go back later and look at John chapter 4 and read it for yourself. It's a pretty long section. So I'll give you the Mark version. He looks at her and says, give me a drink. She says, why are you talking to me? You're not supposed to talk to me. You people don't talk to us people. Why are you talking to me? He says, you should be asking me for a drink because the water I have is alive. Makes perfect sense, right? She says, but you don't have a bucket. How are you going to get this water? Because you didn't even bring a bucket. I got the bucket. You don't have the bucket. What in the world are you talking about? He says, I'm talking about a different water, one that satisfies forever. And she says, I'll have a pint of that. That sounds really good. Then Jesus says, which at this point you would expect, like now he said, I got something that you need. She said, okay, I'll take it. And he says, go get your husband. She says, I don't have one. And he says, that's right, you don't have one. You've had 5, and the one you're with right now isn't your husband. Whew, man. I mean, that's not where you saw the conversation going, right? But am I right that it does seem like it's a theme that Jesus isn't afraid to go there? And he knows, and so he pushes that button. I mean, the red button that you're like in a conversation, you're like, I'm not going to push that one. Jesus goes, boom, like, there's a problem. But what is it? Again, like I said a minute ago, Jesus in these conversations is bringing people to a position where they realize that they're desperate. He's not avoiding the red button. No, he's hammering it. So then what does she do? Well, she does what people do in conversations, what people will do in conversations with you, what you do in conversations. She says, hey, there's a debate about worship locations. Right? Like, boy, this conversation just got a little intense. I don't like, so let's talk about this. That over there. And what does Jesus do? Woman, this is bigger than that. She says, I know the Savior is coming. And he says, ding, 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 ding. It's me. I'm right here. I'm with you. So she leaves her jar and she runs to town and she says to the crowds in town, hey, you guys got to come meet this guy. Hey, meet this guy. This guy's maybe the Christ. The disciples return with food. So, they got their bags from Slim's or whatever, and they're walking up. And they're like, hey, why is he talking to her? And then they're like, hey, Rabbi, like, eat, man, eat. What are you doing? Now you're talking to all these other people, these Samaritans. Why don't you just eat chicken strips, man? We can't eat until you eat. So you go ahead and eat because I'm hungry. And Jesus says to him, I've got it here for you, John chapter 4, 31 to 33. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know not about. So the disciples said to one another, has someone brought him something to eat? It sounds exactly like me. I'm like, Am I confused? He told us to go get food. We went and got food. We came back. We're giving him food, and he says he's already got food. I don't know. This guy confuses me. And then Jesus says, my food is to be in obedience to my Father. And I see something here that you guys are missing. There's something happening here that's bigger than these, chicken strips. I guess it could have been pizza. So I've got a few big, just kind of overarching things to think about as we try to enter into these conversations for us today. First of all, these conversations are largely unplanned and inconvenient. Man, if you're in the room and you've tried to jump back into the angry sea, you have found that this is true, that this isn't something that you just put in the convenient little compartment in your life and make some nice little plan and you can do that. But I've watched, that's not what this is, because that's not real. Those aren't relationships. That's some kind of project that you're doing. This feels like it's just part of life. And if you're asking God to have these kinds of interactions, then they're going to come at the time that you didn't want it to, the time that you're wearied from the journey and hungry and sitting beside the well. Now, Jesus did, and I don't want to miss this, Jesus did make his way, a purpose path through Samaria. So it's not just by accident that he's at this well. And I do think that there are big decisions that we make in our life that put us in that place where these conversations can happen. And then if we're in that place and we begin to pray for them, they will come. They will largely come, just like life does, at the moment that you least expect it. I remember when this one decision that I made that was kind of like this. I had a friend, we'd spent some time in Colorado, and I'd gotten interested in whitewater kayaking. And so then we came back to Arkansas, and I went to church one Sunday, and I saw a guy with a boat on top of his car. And I'm like, hey, you do that? And he's like, yeah, I do that. I'm like, can you teach me? And this guy was, pretty rough around the edges, fairly new believer, and pretty brash. And he's like, hey, yeah, I'll teach you. And that next week, he had me at the river. Well, the river can be a dangerous place when you are very much a novice. But he just assumed that I'd be all right. You tough, man. You'll be all right. A few rocks won't kill you. So he takes me down there, and he throws me in the middle of it, and all of his friends, he was like the only guy in this really big group that followed Jesus. Most of them were very against anything that have to do with church or Jesus. And he wanted to be able to talk, but he was real, like I said, he's really kind of rough. And so it was a perfect marriage, right? Me and him are hanging out, He's got all these incredible friendships. I get to meet these guys, share testimony, and talk about who he is and what he's done in our lives. Well, we start, and then we drop the boat off, or we drop one car off, and we're piled into a car back together to drive back up to the front of the river. And I'm looking over at the river, and there are all these huge waterfalls, and it's all white. And I'm scared half to death, y'all. I'm like, man, I've done like the, lazy river. This isn't lazy river, man. This is like river wild. And I don't know what I'm doing. And I've rolled the boat once in a pool, not in that. And so my heart's racing, and I'm like, and then guess what? One of those guys in the car starts asking these questions about Jesus in that car. Like that's not when you ask the question, right? I think it happens. I think God does it that way on purpose. Like when you're not prepared or all polished, and somebody asks you that question, and you're just sharing your heart. I love him, and this is what he's done. Those are the words that are powerful and life-changing. The other thing, these conversations are needed by everybody. Everybody, all. In this story, we've got him with this Samaritan woman. But remember, just chapter 3, he's talking to Nicodemus, right? Like this highly religious guy. It's not just the poor that need it. It's not just the rich that need it. It's interesting. A lot of these stories are the more wealthy. It's not the unreligious that need it. It's not the religious. We're talking about it has crossed every spectrum. All people, and I think we're really guilty of thinking, well, that person needs it, but that person doesn't. Or that grouping of people, boy, that's the they, and they need it. But this, we don't. This happened to me when I was in college because I went to a private Christian school that was across the street from a secular school. And so the idea was, well, if you're on this side of the street, everybody's Christian. And if you cross that street, that side of the street, then everybody's not. And so when I started learning how to talk about Jesus, everybody was like, well, you need to go to that side of the street where the people need it. Because we don't need it over here. And you know what happened? I started to share my story with some folks over here. And what I found out is a lot of the folks on this side of the street, they were like some of the people we've seen in these conversations. They were just as broken, just a different issue. They had tried to, patch themselves up with all their good works, and they were pretty confident, and so they walked around with a smile on their face. Hi, how are you? Good day, good day. How are you? I'm great. What are you? Jesus. Boy, praise the Lord. They had figured out how to play that game. But when I really started to talk about how I had realized that those things were horribly incomplete, that they could only do so much, that I needed Jesus to step in and make me, only his power could do that in his amazing grace. I started to see these people say, yeah, I need that. I never have heard that. I need that. All people, y'all. So you can't look at your life and your circles of influence, your family, your friends, your neighbors, and start picking them out. Oh, that one's fine. Oh, that one's not fine. All of the people that you know, all your peoples, could hear your story and hear more about who this Jesus is. These conversations require authenticity. In this story, we see Jesus, man, he pushes that button. Now, in this story, we've got two people at the well. We've got a sinner, and we got Jesus, right? So we got one sinner at the well. The difference in that and when we have conversations is, y'all, we got two messed up people at the well. The person you're talking to and you. You ain't Jesus, sorry. So what does that mean? Well, the mistake that people make is they try to act like they're Jesus. Like, hey, you got issues. Hey, look how your life's messed up. You did this, you did that, you did that. Man, you really need Jesus. But that's not the truth. The truth is, bro, we're messed up, and we need Jesus. And this is how I've messed up, and this is how I've messed up, and this is how I messed up, and this is all of my dirt that Jesus has entered into my story and begun to clean up. And he'll do that for you too. And the authenticity is not, hey, you're broken. The authenticity is, man, we're broken. And Jesus is the only answer for our desperate state, our desperate state. These conversations require a lot of focus. This is what happens. Just like she tried to jump to this discussion over here, what you will do, what people do is they try to jump to, man, hey, well, let's talk about this debate. Let's talk about politics, or let's talk about, hey, in a church service, is it better to have a electric guitar or an organ? Is that some kind of debate, some kind of thing to get the conversation off of our broken state, because nobody wants to talk about that. This last week, I was talking to a teenage boy about girls. I was trying to talk to a teenage boy about girls. You know what happens when you try to talk to a teenage boy about girls? He changes the subject. That's what he does. He jumps over and says, hey, well, what about this, Dad? Don't you like that music? Yeah, bro, I do. But hey, what about that? No, let's do something. No, bro. What about that? And that's what people do. They want to run. They don't want to have that conversation. The conversation that they most need to have. The conversations that you most need to be having are the ones that you try to run from the most. And Jesus brings the focus back and says, no, there's something bigger than that. And then the last thing is that these conversations they are urgent. Jesus says to him, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say there are 4 months till the harvest comes? But I tell you, lift your eyes. The fields are ripe for harvest. We can pretend and look around and think, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just wait till next week. I'll just wait, next month. Oh, it'll be fine. When that angry ocean people are gasping their last breaths. And when somebody's drowning, you don't sit in the boat and go, well, let's see if he makes it. Do you? You dive in as quick as you possibly can. I was on a boat yesterday with our twins, and we were just at the dock, and Darcy was dancing kind of on the side of the boat, and in my mind, I kind of saw her falling off into the water, and I was already positioning myself like, if she did, how quickly could I get to her? And how quickly would she go under and underneath the dock? And how would I swim down to her? How quickly could I respond to somebody in the water, in this cold water? His disciples didn't get it, and y'all, we don't either. We just kind of take our time. Oh, there's time. When all the while people are drowning all around us, your friends, your family, your people. But there's time. I've had a lot of things lately where people are close to death or dying that I'm connected to. And I'm just really, right now, just aware of how short and fleeting life is. These conversations are urgent. And then what happens to this lady? She is our model. She realizes who Jesus is, and it says that she runs back to her peeps, her people. And she tells her people, hey, I found him. Come with me. So what does she do? She goes to her people. So for us, this is just as practical as it gets, y'all. This morning, think about this. Who are your people? Who is that circle that you have? Who does it include? Friends, family, neighbors, co-workers. Who does it not include that it should include? What is that hobby that you should start so that you can make some new relationships? If this circle is really small because you don't ever interact with anybody and don't have many relationships, what could you do to have more? But who are your people? Ask God to reveal that, to give you eyes to see the harvest around you. And then when you go to that group, it's not complicated. If you met him and you know him, then you tell the story. I was with an older couple this weekend that, man, I could tell they had eyes for one another. You know, they still liked each other, even though they've been married a while. And I just couldn't wait to ask the question, man, so tell me how y'all met. Man, he was kind of a little red-faced. She started to tell the story. You know, they were telling their little jokes about how she was engaged, and he broke up the engagement, and he stole her away. And, man, there was all this beauty and this. I mean, this is a love story that we have with Jesus. That's a story we tell, your story. And people love stories. You know, Terry came back from the women's retreat last night, and the stories that she's telling, or she's these incredible women that she met, that some that shared up front, that some that she met on the side, and they were telling their stories, and they were incredible stories. And she was pretty much telling them word for word, because that's what happens with stories. So you find your people, you tell your story, and then she invites them to come. And y'all, this church is a place that we've tried as much as we possibly can to make it a place that you invite one of your people and you bring them here, that this will be a place that they'll hear about him, that they'll be exposed to him. They won't be run off, but hopefully this can be a place where they can find him and grow in him. So as a group, we should just be bringing people all the time, you know? So I guess the question, y'all, is, are we going to obey? Like what Jack said, no, Daddy, you can have Jesus if it means you have to wash the dishes. Are we going to obey, or are we going to say, walk away sad? Like this rich young ruler that we read about a few weeks ago. That we know that it would be incredible to be with Jesus in the middle of the angry ocean, but you know what? That's for somebody else. I'm just going to stay up here on the platform doing my thing and let those people drown. And let somebody else have that incredible relationship with Jesus where they're in mission and purpose and life together and all the things. No, I'm not going to obey. I'm just going to stay up here. Man, that wouldn't be us, y'all. I really think that God is calling us to a season of this. We know a lot of people. If we added it all together in this room, all of our circle of influences, imagine how many people that is that desperately need to hear this story of redemption that Jesus gives and desperately need to be a part of a community of life-giving community like this. How many women needed to be at that retreat this weekend, y'all, that you know? Let me pray for us. Father, I know that your word doesn't leave any room for us to wiggle. You didn't save us just so that we could be about our own business and then be with you in heaven. That's not what it looks like. No, you saved us and gave us life, fully expecting and inviting us, just like you did to each one of these folks in these conversations, inviting us to be a part of your mission with you, to be a part of the next person that you're going to reach out to and draw in, that you're going to bring life to. So, Father, I pray that we would take that seriously. Of all the things that we're a part of, what could be more important? What? Making money? Having fun? What? If we found you, what could be more important than helping somebody else find that also? So, Father, please give us your eyes to see how ready the harvest is and the courage to step into it. Amen.